Okay, so I'm here today just to talk to you a little bit about what we do and maybe shed some light on, I suppose give you a bit of insight really, which lots of other speakers may have already done, so forgive me if I'm kind of repeating stuff and stop years now as somebody who had been bereaved. So my partner, the father of my two children, took his own life 10 years ago. And for me, I had never been in this situation before, and after about 9 months in, I thought, okay, it's time to see to me now, because my boys were fine. The boys are 13 and 24 now and getting on with things. But I just needed a bit of time, a bit of space, a bit of empathy really, because I didn't know anyone else this had happened to. So that's how I became involved with this charity, and as lots of people will experience, you go in at one level and you end up saying, oh yeah, I'll do an hour here, or I'll do an hour there, or I'll run a support group, or anyway, cut a very long story short, I've ended up as the head of this charity now on a voluntary basis. For the charity I wear lots of hats, as well as all the other things, but I'm also a member of an all-party parliamentary group, and I represent our charity on that all-party parliamentary group. And what that means is that I play a part in advising government on their suicide prevention strategy. So we meet about once every 8 weeks in Parliament, and we sit with ministers and MPs and various different people from all parties, hence the name. And we advise government, so I'm part of that group on looking at the suicide prevention strategy for England and Wales, but also then looking at the implementation strategy as well. So just to give you a little bit of background really, that's the stuff that I'm involved with. So as Praz just said, this is what we do. So everything that we offer is free. Even the helpline is kind of a local rate number. And basically, we're seeing a lot of people who've been bereaved by suicide. Now, increasingly, and this is where I link in with you really, I'm seeing people, when I say I, I'm talking about the kind of royal I, the whole charity. We're seeing people who are involved with assisted suicide. So it may be one of their relatives, their husband, their wives, their partners, their mum, their dad, whoever, their friend, who have been part of that decision-making process, but are actually now experiencing some of the emotions that we're going to go through, okay? So this is not just people who are very shocked and this is unexpected. So yeah, I suppose this is my bit really, which is where I very quickly, once I started attending the support group, it's a peer-led support group, so it's not counselling, it is people who are in the same situation talking to each other and sharing experiences. This is the bit that really swung it for me really. I could see it was working, I could feel it was working for me, so it was something that I kind of wanted to give a little bit back to. Okay, so we have a confidential helpline. We get about 4,000 calls a year, that's gone up to nearly 5,000. We've got a website, we do some helping people by email, because they may have small children and they can't get out to a support group, so we help people by email. We've got 50 support groups around the UK. We've only got one in London, believe it or not, at the moment, but we're looking at opening another 4, because it's about 80 people turn up to that every single time. And we can also run along formal counselling as well, so and we don't have any waiting times, for instance, so you may wait for counselling for, I don't know, a week, 6 weeks, 6 months, a year. You can just come to us whenever you want. We hold one-day conferences and training events, and we also hold residential events as well, both for professionals and people who have been bereaved. Okay, so most suicidal people don't want to die, but they want to end their pain. Is that something that has kind of gone through lots of speakers that you've had?
Oh yeah, I think the majority that we've had before, they're not meaning to draw kind of but they have been looking at assisted suicide as well, so that is those, I suppose, for terminally ill, which in some ways...
So this kind of ties in directly with that, I suppose, really. Lots of people are in pain that isn't going to stop, and so this is the option that's left. had all of these statistics already, but just in case you haven't, here are some statistics for you. So in the Office of National Statistics, ONS figures, they only measure people over 15. So there'll be a big, quite a large, substantial number of people who are taking their lives younger. So again, this is unplanned suicides, if you like. So this is not assisted suicides. Highest rate is still that age group, 30 to 44 males, really, really difficult to reach group. And funnily enough, we're actually seeing an increase in people coming to our support groups of that age group, and people are talking about what, if they've been bereaved by suicide, they're talking about it with us rather than thinking, I also need to go down that path. So this is also forming prevention work as well as post-vention work. So after the event, this is also started to form prevention work as well. The rate of male suicide has gone up in this particular category, and the Office of National Statistics, I'm not going to say that again, the ONS have said that they are 95% sure that that is due to the economic downturn. So it's really unusual for them to say that, to give something that they think is probably why we're seeing an increase. And female suicides as well will also increase. Okay, for every person who takes their own life, whether it be assisted suicide or what I'm going to call unplanned suicide, obviously the person has sometimes planned it quite meticulously, but there are about 10 people affected, so they're the numbers that we work on. That could be friends, colleagues, siblings, anybody. It can be the psychiatrist that was treating the person, it can be the nurse who admitted the person to A&E, it can be anybody. And we will see any of those people. You don't have to be a relative, as it were. Okay, so these are some of the emotions that we see in our groups. So, and I have to say that, again, just talking to Prize before I started, lots of these emotions I'm seeing experienced by people who are part of the planning process for assisted suicide. So, in some ways, these are not isolated to one type of suicide. This can also be experienced by people who have enabled or helped the person in the assisted suicide case to make the decision. In some ways, the guilt of that and actually having an active part in that process can actually be worse than if you didn't know anything about it. So in my case, I didn't know anything about it. I just walked in and found my partner. I didn't know that that was going to happen. There was no warning signs, there was nothing. I spoke to him 10 minutes before I found him. I can't have been part of the planning process. I don't know how it would feel for me to have been part of that planning process. So the guilt that some people have experienced can be quite overwhelming. The shock and disbelief is less so because they were an active part of the process. So they kind of knew that was going to happen on that particular day in that particular way. The anger, again, can be an emotion that comes a little bit later. So it can be quite a destructive emotion if it's not handled in the right way, or if it's not given an outlet. Relief, again, that can be specifically experienced by people who are part of the assisted suicide plan, if you like. Shame, I think people are talking about it a little bit more, and the taboo is breaking down, but believe you me, it's definitely still there. People would definitely prefer to talk to me about art than they would about death. The sadness, yeah, everybody's going to feel sad if somebody they love has passed away. But there's a deepening sadness here because you often associate it with if I'd have done this, if I'd have done that, if I'd have not done this, not done that. And trauma. trauma is a really, really big one that we see. There are a lot of people who actually have post-traumatic stress disorder, and we see them, they present to the support group, and I can tell over a number of sessions if somebody is feeling no elevation in any of these emotions at all, or it's been a substantial amount of time and they're still having difficulties with lots of these emotions, it may be that we suggest that people go back to their doctors, because it may well be that they have post-traumatic stress disorder, which again isn't unusual. Anybody got any questions about that set of emotions? I presented you with quite a hefty list there. So can you see how they would be appropriate to somebody who you didn't know that somebody was going to take their own life, but could also be in the case of assisted suicide?
Where you have the figure that you estimate 10 people are directly affected for every unassisted suicide,
yeah.
Do you have a figure for how many people you estimate are affected for assisted suicides?
No.
And those people that come to you with some of these
I don't, but that figure of 10, it used to be 6. So
right. Why did it change?
Because I think it was that they reassessed it, the ONS reassessed it, and basically people's family groups have changed, and also their interactions on the internet and things like that. So if somebody passes away on Facebook, and you know, so if somebody passes away in whatever way, and somebody puts something up on Facebook on their page or whatever, you get 3,000 people, you know, commenting and memorialising the person. So actually that figure of 10 pales into insignificance, because there's potentially thousands of people that have been affected. So things have changed a little bit in the way that we are talking about death. There's some very open conversations that I see going on Facebook, for instance, or Twitter. Can be an enormous emotional outpouring, which actually can help with some of this if it's done in a positive way or moderated in a positive way. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, do you have relatives or people who've gone through assisted suicide coming to you?
Yeah.
Do you have statistics on that?
We don't, because it's a fairly new thing that we're seeing actually, and you have people who phone up and they say that their loved one, whoever it is, has gone through the assisted suicide process, and they say, so are we allowed to come to your group? Yes, is the answer. But there is that where they ring up and they almost feel as if they're not, are they allowed to do that? Are they permitted to, to come along?
I mean, I can recognise every single one of those. I can also recognise having some of them in conflict with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you there, actually.
Yeah.
I agree with you. A lot of my family didn't know that I felt angry for a long time, because I couldn't tell them, because I felt it was disrespectful.
I mean, anger, guilt and relief, I can absolutely identify with them. Yeah.
And they can take a lot of energy to deal with any one of these emotions, let alone the conflict. So when you're trying to maybe go back to work, or you're trying to look after your boys, or you're trying, these are the things that are going on in your head, and quite often your stomach, because you can feel this is with you. So, quite a lot of this is as you rightly said.
You have no means of processing them or
Exactly.
getting rid of them.
Exactly,
Yeah.
which is where the talking comes in. It's very simple to talk to someone over a coffee or whatever, but actually it really, really helps in looking at some of these things. Okay, we can go back to any of this. I'm happy to just do whatever. Okay, so just on the talking about things, it's just to make a point of talking to people without judging them, let them set the pace. There may be people who are part of a family where somebody has gone through assisted suicide and they didn't know anything about it, or they didn't have any part to play in it. And so for them, they just had no control over a situation. So what you can do, or what you can be mindful of, is giving them control back. So let them set the pace of the conversation. Tiny thing, but actually, when you've lost control, you had no say over what was going to happen, like in my case. This can be really, really important. Offer practical help. So whether somebody's taken their own life through assisted suicide, or somebody that you didn't know was going to do that, there'll be a practical fallout from this as well. So my income into my household stopped the moment that Mark died, and because he'd taken his own life, no insurance paid out. So I went back to work after 10 days because lots of people offered to feed my kids, lots of people offered to feed me, but I kind of had some pride left, so I went back to the garden. Avoid blaming someone. So, you know, if someone's, I got this all the time, saying, oh my God, how selfish, how could he do that, how could he leave you and the kids? He wasn't leaving me and the kids, he was in a really dark place that I unfortunately didn't know anything about. Me and the kids couldn't penetrate that dark place, we weren't even figuring in the picture. Share memories, so talk about the person. Just because they've been to Dignitas or wherever they've been to, they still lived an amazing life. Talk about that. Don't just focus on the way the person died. And signposts. So if you've got somebody who has been through this process, they may, like I did, need to talk about it. So signpost people on. Say, have you been in touch with us? Have you been in touch with whoever? So do pass stuff on. And consider using appropriate language. And I'd just like to spend a minute or so talking about appropriate language, especially when you're looking at the project you're looking at. Okay. Language is really, really important. I worked in PR for years before I started running the painting prize. And I know how important language is, as you as design students will also know. So let's have a look at, tell me how you feel about the words committed suicide. How do you feel about them? Would you use it? Have you used it? Would you ever say that someone committed suicide? Sorry.
It feels like judging.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, legal terminology, that's what, yeah.
Legal terminology.
Yeah.
It's not just legal terminology, it's criminal terminology.
Yeah.
And that's where people like me, who may have said it in the past, maybe I said it the day before it happened to me, but I didn't say it the day after.
I mean, suicide itself,
Yeah.
Latin, judicial,
Yeah, absolutely.
horrible word.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So it's just be mindful of committed suicide. Another one that's being bandied around the press at the moment is successful suicide. Successful.
It's really interesting now. Just pausing for a second.
Yeah.
I would, if I was in a situation where I'd given up, and I'd say looked at Syria or whatever, I just thought that this is not where I want to be.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk to somebody about it. I would never in 1,000 years say I'm thinking about suicide.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I'm thinking about not being here.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of leaving.
Yeah.
I would use much more colloquial
Yeah.
language, even if it's a very
Absolutely.
dramatic thing.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. I'm always listening out for that. So in the support group that I run, I'm always listening for people saying words like you just said. I'm thinking about not being here anymore.
Yeah.
Do they mean in that room? Do they mean in that university? Do they mean kind of opting out completely and taking their own lives?
Yeah.
So again, the nuances of language can be really, really important.
And suicide is not exactly a standalone word, is it?
No.
Because there's so many other words that are attached to it.
Absolutely.
It's like euthanasia.
Connotations, euthanasia, connotations, always connotations. Just looking at language, when I inherited this fantastic charity that I believe so much in, as a PR person, as I was, before that, when I saw the name of this charity, my heart sank. And when I saw the acronym, it sank even. My charity is SOBS, and it's, try doing some PR around that. It's like really, really, really hard. Really, really
Hugely critical for these guys.
Yeah.
In being advocates one with the other.
Yeah. So SOBS just sounds as if we sit there all day crying, and it's like it's not going to get any better. This is it now. This is, you just have to go around in black, and this is it. So as a PR message with a charity with a name like that, it was difficult. When I also became head of the charity, they were using a lot of clip art. Exactly. They were using a clip art sunset, so the top half was bright, the bottom half was dark. They were photocopying leaflets. So I decided that in things like this, you bring whatever skills you have to the table. So I brought all my skills to the table. I did my best. I had a friend who has got a design company, and we worked together on changing things a little bit. So we introduced the colour purple as part of our logo, because purple is quite a soothing colour. We went through lots of colours, believe me, and it's gender neutral. So I didn't want people to think that this was only for men or women or whatever. So it's gender neutral. It's quite creative. It's also neutral to sexuality as well. I also worked with the trustees and dragged them into the process, and we introduced this little icon here. So we got rid of the clip art. Clip art was banned, and I worked really hard with the design agency and the trustees, and we came up with this little logo here, which is a visual of 3 people embracing.
Done really well. I remember working for the school of voluntary euthanasia society, and I remember saying, who on earth would want to join a society that didn't even understand what the lyrics?
No. And the reason why we use 3 people is because we don't offer professional counselling. We offer peer support, which isn't one-to-one. It's 3 or more. So that was just a way of kind of conveying what we do, even if you just kind of saw that. And the embracing was really, really important as well. Verdicts and conclusions. So I've been working with my all-party parliamentary group hat on. I've been working with the chief coroner, me as well as lots of other people from different charities, and we've been talking to him about the language that coroners use. So in the case of assisted suicide, what would it say on somebody's, when they have an inquest, what would it say was the cause of death? What would it say? Would it say suicide? Would it say assisted suicide? Would it say death by lethal injection? Would it say whatever?
You know what Spike Milligan said on his gravestone?
He wasn't allowed it in the end, you know.
He said, I told him I was ill.
I told him I was ill. So now we asked, along with lots of other people, we asked the chief coroner. So the coroners in England and Wales, they didn't used to have anybody as their head. There was no chief coroner. There were just lots of people who were coroners doing things their own way in different jurisdictions. Now they have a chief coroner who is a wonderful person, Peter Thornton. And he's just recently brought in some reforms, and one of the really significant parts of the reform is that coroners now have been asked not to use the word verdict, again coming back to criminal language. So a verdict is something that's passed down on somebody who's done something that they probably shouldn't. And now we have conclusions. So families don't have to talk about verdicts, committing suicide anymore. They can use other words, and this is really, really important, especially if you're one of my boys who are now 13 and 24, and they're going to see their father's death certificate one day, and it's going to say what it says on marks is hanging. So black and white.
Huge step.
Black and white.
From verdict to conclusion. Is enormous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's now a little bit more. There's a little bit more sensitivity around that, so that the documents that we carry around for the rest of our lives, hopefully, are going to be slightly more sensitive.
So it's about the vocabulary that kind of
Very much
changes.
so. Yeah, very much so.
I mean, death certificate isn't very nice either.
Yeah. Contagion. Have you looked at Contagion at all? Do you know what Contagion is?
No.
Okay. When someone takes their own life, assisted or otherwise, there is an effect that we talk about quite a lot called contagion. Contagion is, as the word suggests, contagious, something that can be caught. Okay. If somebody takes their own life, it may not have come into your psyche before, your circle of friends or family. If one of your friends or family takes their own life, all of a sudden, you know about suicide. It's entered your thinking, it's entered your world, it's on your radar, and it may not have been there before. If you're feeling not too great, if you're feeling vulnerable, if you have mental health issues, if you have addiction issues, if you have anything that makes you at all vulnerable, a seed may have just been planted in your head. And if, God forbid, you went on and you decided that you might take your own life, something's happened. A trigger that wasn't there before has just entered your world, whether that be assisted suicide or an unplanned suicide. Contagion is something that people are really, really afraid of. So do you remember the Bridgend cases? In Bridgend, which is a place in Wales, it looked on paper as if they had a cluster of suicides with young people taking their own lives, a cluster of suicides. It actually wasn't, really. It was the way that it was reported in the media. The media reported those suicides with such ferocity that on several occasions, a journalist arrived on the doorstep of the person, of the family, before the ambulance did. And there was a leak somewhere, okay? So the fear around Bridgend, and the reason why people look at that town as being really important for lessons that we need to learn, is because of contagion. So they thought that because one person had taken their life, then another person did, then another person did, then another person did, okay? So contagion is something that you need to be really, really mindful of when you're designing whatever side of the argument you're coming down on, because this is a big responsibility. There's also something called hotspots. So when we're making programs, television documentaries, we always advise people not to show the actual site where someone's taken their own lives, because like Beachy Head, it becomes a hotspot where people will go in order to take their own lives. So again, these are things that you need to be really mindful of because they're very real.
Yeah. Like driving off a cliff or something.
Method, place, just the idea of it. You've got to be really responsible and really think hard about those things. They're really, really important. Okay, so this is our website, so you can have a look at what else we do. You can have a look where the support groups are, you can have a look at, we're just having a revamp actually, so the site will be brand new in a few weeks. And yeah, that's it. Questions? Yeah.
Can I start a question in reverse? Then?
Yes, please.
All right. This term around contagion, is it?
Yeah.
In relation to assisted suicide.
Yeah.
How does that sort of advice work in regard to not planting seeds or
Yeah.
what would you say are the sensitive touch points to sort of be aware of or be mindful of? Because I would imagine that they might be a little bit different between a sort of unassisted suicide and assisted suicide.
Yeah. But when you're looking at things like, okay, before you did this module, how many people had heard of Dignitas? Do you know what Dignitas is now?
What was that again?
I'm just saying that before you did this module, this project, how many people had heard of the Dignitas clinic? Yeah, okay. You've heard about that in the press, I presume? Okay. So there's a responsibility there, even with assisted suicide that is very carefully planned and very carefully monitored. Some of you have heard of that through the press, so there needs to be some sensible reporting. So if I came out of a hospital and I've just been given a diagnosis that I had a year to live and the last 6 months of it, that might be extremely painful. I now know about Dignitas. I didn't know about it before. So there's a responsibility there. And there also is, if you are doing a campaign where you're going to be publicising the role that Dignitas can play, I'm not just picking on Dignitas, I'm just picking on it because it's kind of the most well known at the moment, then you need to do that in a responsible way that doesn't glamorise it, doesn't make people think that you can just do this without lots and lots of thought into it and thinking of consequences and thinking of the consequences for those people who are left behind. So I suppose that's what I mean by treating this in a very socially responsible way, because you've actually got quite a powerful tool in your hands, design-wise, and if you decide to promote it as being the best thing since sliced bread, then you need to be ready to look at the consequences of that. I'm not saying what's right or wrong, it's just something that needs to be thought of, which you may would.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I mean, I hope I never visit for these people, and it's also quite hard for me to be responsible about how to be useful. So, and I'm thinking in particular language. I have an inclination to say, do not talk about assisted suicide.
Okay.
On the other hand, you know, I remember when I ran a company and we had someone who we called head of HR, we called them attention seeker as a title, which was a very unusual title, but it actually got to the point much better than PR gets to the point, because it's actually seeking attention. So for me, language is a completely crucial part of this project. And I don't want to mislead people by saying don't use assisted suicide just because I happen to find that is what you call a hotspot. It already distances the emotional feelings around that and puts a label on it, and therefore in terms of the work that these guys are going to do, moving people's attitudes, it's very difficult to start using cliches like assisted suicide. So
and the thing with the word assisted as well, I think the word assisted is really something that needs to be explored. So if you murdered someone, the person who helped you could be an accomplice or an assistant or somebody who's helped you commit that crime. Say not murder, say whatever, you know, a burglar's accomplice or whatever. So the word assisted sometimes can make it seem okay, because it wasn't me, I got help to do it. It wasn't just me acting alone. And I'm not sure, it's something that I would wrestle with. I'm not sure whether that makes it better or worse. But there's something about the word assisted that kind of almost makes it sound more palatable. I don't know.
You know, this is a design college about designing. And I spent a great deal of my designing life turning people onto the power of language. Because, you know, we talk to people relatively easily, all of us, but once we turn it into some kind of communication, posters and stuff like that, it's so difficult to keep authentic self-expression happening, and you just turn off.
So in your design work, do you always look at the Lucozade example? Do you always set the Lucozade example? Do you talk about that or not?
I mean, these guys are communications and product design perspective.
Communications and product design wise, Lucozade, So in the 70s, you'd go to hospital and somebody had Lucozade by their bed. It was really bad. That was it. It was over. They were like, not for this world anymore. You were very, very, very ill if you had Lucozade by your bed. Okay. The stuff that changed around Lucozade, the marketing, the packaging, all of that changed design-wise. They changed it. They turned it on its head. Now it's a $1 trillion business. You probably sell it in your canteen. Every young person will drink it or whatever, and it's changed. It's not associated with people who are dying anymore. The message has changed. It's very much associated with people who are alive and vibrant. The chemical makeup is still exactly the same. The product hasn't changed. The packaging has changed. The message has changed. The design of the packaging has changed. The PR, every aspect of that product has changed, except for the formula.
It's the language that's actually changed.
The language.
I think your talk has been amazing within the frame of language. When you talk about changing the whole language regarding your organization, and how the whole perception changes of the language.
Well, I mean, in hospitals, the language which says no change actually means someone's going to die.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So the Lucozade example is quite good because it's something that literally changed from being associated with death to being associated with living, just through the power of design, marketing, and PR.
Yeah, it's an interesting example because I remember I think I was in that hybrid, or maybe a lot of us were in that hybrid period where, my association with Lucozade is not death, but it's still, actually in my head, Lucozade is still what you get when you're ill.
Exactly.
Or what someone else gets when they're ill.
But now it's a health drink. It's associated with training, it's associated with vitality, with energy, with somebody being at their peak physical fitness, and at the absolute opposite to what it was associated with when I was little. If you walked in and your grandma had Lucozade, no go. Now I'd be like, oh my god, why is she drinking that? So it's how this stuff can be used in a really, really powerful way. And you're dealing with a really emotive issue here. So, and I have to say, when I first got emails about this, I have to say I was like, oh my god, you're so brave tackling this subject. Anybody have any other questions or anything they want to talk about? How are you all feeling about this, by the way? You're dealing with a really, really heavy subject. How are you all feeling about this? Are you all okay?
That's a very good question.
I just want to say I'm really surprised and very happy to notice that there is an association or organization doing this such thing, because that's actually, I'm seriously thinking about maybe we could talk about more, because I was one of this. And what I'm doing now, my communication to that question is visualize my process during 3 years, how to overcome the listed. I have every single one of them.
Okay.
And I have the angry, I have the guilty, and somehow I just find a way to overcome it. And I really feel like the way when I was talking to people about this and visualize it, and at the same time I'm making myself feel better, at the same time I'm making others feel better.
That's exactly that's what you embody is exactly what we're doing. So we're literally saying to people, it's not going to cost you any money, but we know that you will feel better, or you will feel more settled with this if you talk about it. Even if you sit and cry, or you sit and shout, or you don't say anything. Either way, it's this type of bereavement, planned or otherwise, is very, very isolating, because fortunately lots of people will go through their lives without experiencing this type of bereavement, and we don't see anybody else with any other type of bereavement. We know that there are some emotions associated with this type of bereavement that are really, really special and need real care. So this is why we're very specific that we deal with people who've been bereaved in this way.
And you carry these things, even for me today, here, now, I had thought about an incident that happened when I was probably 15, where someone died in a bath with an epileptic fit because somebody left them alone in the bathroom at school. It's only just come back to me now, but I've been carrying it unconsciously for decades.
Because with your resilience, that's your resilience playing a part. That's your inner ability to be able to cope with those things. So I went back to work after 10 days. My kids went back to school because we had to normalise this. We had to do that, because otherwise, if I hadn't have opened my front door again, I would never have opened a front door again ever.
No.
So I had to do that. I had to do that, but nobody was telling me I had to do that.
Yeah, it's like I also refuse to go home. I don't want to go home, but somehow I have to.
Yeah.
I avoid for a few months. I feel like what I've done, I just turn my own home into a tube.
Yes.
Cemetery, what I've done. So I have to normalize it.
But you also have to take care of yourself. This project will be kicking up a lot of stuff for people, and you really have got to take care of yourselves and give yourself some time. I'm not saying you're going to get an extension for this project. I'm not saying that you can hand it in later, but just please. Oh my God, your tutors are going to get them. But I'm just saying, you know, just make sure you just take a little bit of time and just take care of yourselves, because it's really heavy.
I think it's a great point you're making, especially for communication designers, project designers, whoever's working within the social context, because we're working within the area of social responsive design.
Yeah.
So we tend to, in a sense, tackle similar issues which have very strong social consequences. At the same time, I think it'd be good for the students to kind of, in a sense, learn how to engage with it, whilst at the same time disengage to some extent, while keeping their own sanity, retain their own, you know, focus.
Yes, I mean, one thing is to take precisely the opposite of your genuine attitude and work on that.
Yes, absolutely. That's a good way to do it.
Plenty of distance.
Yeah, and empathy as well.
Yeah.
Related to that, I'd like to position. So we had a really interesting chat just before from the British Humanist Association, and he was, you know, a compelling speaker as well, and one of his positions was that the rights of individualism so far outweigh the costs of leaving people behind that assisted suicide can be justified, or is consistently justified. And it flagged up for me that these sort of, as in discussions that we've had, I think, in previous weeks, it flagged up for me in these sort of tensions around, again, the language of terms like individualism and independence versus language of things like dependence and family and community. And I wonder how you deal with these kind of tensions, or just whether you could talk around that a little bit.
I think for me, so if we go back to, do you mind if I just go back to that list of emotions? Okay. So, my 3 and 13, when this happened to us, had no choice. So, they have both grown up without their father. They had no choice. None of us knew that this was on the cards. So, I suppose that's where it dictated some of my, am I answering the right question? So this is where it dictated some of my emotions, because I could see in them that they were experiencing some of this, but they hadn't opted into any of that. They were going through this really quite painful process, and we were all going through this emotional process, but none of us had opted into that. So, so I think that when it comes to, what were those words that you said?
Well, I can imagine that you get people come to you and say, you know, maybe I'm preempting the wrong things because I'm not in your position. You know, but sort of individualism versus dependence, or independence versus dependence, is something that seems to keep floating to the top.
So do you mean that people independently can make this decision, not to be around anymore? Yeah. And then the people that depend on them are kind
And what I'm aware of is that these terms, independence and dependence, are big sort of statements where we're talking about language. They're in themselves, they're big statements of language. And I just wonder whether you have to deal with that, or whether it doesn't really come up.
I mean, basically, if somebody comes to our group and they present and they say, right, I don't want to be here anymore, within my rights, and them being over 18 and not a vulnerable adult, there actually isn't a great deal I can do about it. I can give them the greatest gift that you can give anybody in that situation, which is the time and space to explore the way that they're feeling, which is really what the guy from the Samaritans will talk to you about. It's about giving people that time and space. But ultimately, what I've learned as an individual, making my way through this list and going back up it and going into it and whatever, what I've learned is to allow Mark to have ownership of the decision he made. Whether he made it in the mind of somebody who was rational or irrational, or whether he had loads of other problems that I didn't know anything about, or whatever else was going on in his life that may or may not have been a good enough reason to not want to be here anymore, or not talk to me about not wanting to be here anymore. The only way that I could stand here today is because I learned to work with some of these emotions and to use them positively as a dependent in this situation. But also to give him complete 100% ownership of the decision that he made. And that was like a revelatory experience for me, and it took me about 4 years to get there. But once I'd kind of given him that and said, okay, our circumstances won't change if I kind of keep beating myself up over kind of not driving home fast enough, or not having a conversation with him, or not asking the right questions, or not picking up on the right things. That's not going to help because he still isn't here. So I suppose the independence thing is that everybody has got the option, their own right to not want to be here anymore. I wouldn't ever take that away from anybody, but what I would offer them is the space to talk about some of this and to maybe come to a different conclusion.
But I would really like to ask you, how would you just whatever you said right now, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But how would you recontextualize all of this within assisted suicide debate?
Yeah.
Because that's where, then is there, where do you see the line that separates suicide from assisted suicide?
The difficulty with somebody like me and the people that I see, and so my organisation...
That's why we want to know what you think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. My organisation, we have 150 volunteers. The whole of my organisation is run on volunteers. We only have 1.5 paid members of staff. Okay, so this is like a big altruistic situation where people are given a lot of time. We will see anybody, whether they've been bereaved by planned-assisted suicide or non-assisted suicide. So we don't differentiate, because the people that we're seeing are still experiencing these emotions, whether they've been part of that planning process or not. So I think from my point of view, if somebody isn't here anymore because they've chosen, in whatever state of mind, rational, irrational, with the most compelling reason in the world not to be here anymore, the people who walk away from that clinic, or the people who walk away from that funeral, may still experience some of this. They may not, they may be absolutely fine and never touch on any of this. But to my mind, and as part of my organisation, we don't differentiate, because to us the people are still bereaved by suicide, whether it was assisted or not. So we will still open our doors, we will still put the kettle on and make that person a cup of tea. We don't differentiate, because the people who are left after the person is out of their pain or their suffering or whatever they needed to get away from, there's still people who are left behind, and that may even be the people that work in the clinic. They may not be relatives of the people who they just helped to die.
So would you say that these emotions are in a sense triggered by death that's not happened naturally, whether it's assisted or it's like self-inflicted?
Because the person has still made the decision. So my husband made the decision, and that's what happened. Okay, the person in the clinic made the decision, and that's what's happened. The fallout from the decision-making process is still there. The person who made the decision still made the decision. Whether they could do it themselves or not is semantics as far as
so it takes it back to natural and unnatural death.
It takes it back to somebody that you love, for whatever reason, deciding that they don't want to be here anymore. That's what it takes it back to.
I think the word sudden is quite important, because when these guys see, I don't know if they had yet, A Short Trip to Switzerland, which is an extraordinary film here with Julie Walters, that wasn't sudden. And in a sense, I think the sense of the family after it was complete, because it wasn't sudden, it wasn't a shock. They didn't want us to do it, but she talked them through it.
So what you can do is you can take out a couple of these emotions, but you're still left with about 10.
Yeah.
Okay, so you
or
can.
It might be that these happen before rather than
Yes,
after.
exactly.
You have time, exactly.
And it's not that they don't happen, but
They've
already happened.
They happen
People have
together
already
with
had a chance to work through it.
Because this is what these immersion talks are all about, unpacking the idea, the notions that are actually attached to these.
And you're right, they were furious with it.
Yeah. So,
all those things.
so these emotions, and there may be a much longer list, but these are just the key ones. You know, you may experience some relief, for instance, if the person's been really ill, or you know, they've decided to planned and gone through this assisted suicide process. You may experience more relief. I didn't experience any relief. I didn't want relieving of his company or him being there. I didn't experience any relief. So I may never experience that. But actually, some of these other things might play a really big part, and it will change as you go through your life. So, you know, this is not definitive, and this is not to say you're going to walk out the clinic and then you're going to go do this one, then you're going to do this one, then you're going to do this one. It doesn't work like that. We're humans, so, you know, we have got programs. So, I think, to my mind, and as far as my organisation is concerned, and we will see anybody, because suicide is suicide is suicide, whether you planned it or whatever. Some people who take their own lives and it looks like a big shock and the family are very shocked, or the friends. The planning has been going on for months when they look back and they look at emails and whatever. So does that make it any better or worse? I don't think there is better or worse.
Extraordinary list, because I don't know if there's different people in this room whose first language is different from English, for example. But those words, anger, guilt, shame, relief, fear, are so vivid that we all know, even by saying those words, we can all get into the edge of the territory. It's very powerful.
Even in, well, I feel personally, even two-dimension, they kind of radiate
absolutely.
the feeling.
Absolutely.
It just comes out, it jumps at you.
That'll be the beautiful colour purple I selected.
It is a beautiful
We'll
colour.
go back to design.
Even though it looks like Cadbury's chocolate bar.
Well, you see, I'm trying to evoke those emotions that get released when you eat chocolate. So I'm wanting you to feel
Chocolate is supposed to help.
Positively predisposed to
Everything.
The shame of eating chocolate.
The other thing about suicide as well is, and I don't know whether you have been using this phrase, which is really important, but the phrase is complex grief. So the type of grief that people like me, and you at the back, experienced is something called complex grief. It's not regular grief. It's not that somebody has died through old age, or somebody has died very suddenly in a car crash, for instance, or anything else. This is complex grief. And complex means that these things are going to stick around for a bit. So this is not ordinary grief. And I don't want to take away from anybody else's grief, but this is a name that is given to this type of grief by psychiatrists and psychologists. This is complex grief.
It's got layers attached.
Yeah. So there's layers attached. So it's tricky stuff. So complex grief is another term that's can be used to encompass some of these emotions when you're writing about this.
Just to finish that.
Yeah. I've got no idea what time it is, by the way. You need to chuck me out.
No, thank you so much, Sandra. I mean, I suppose from a point when you're talking about tone and how we kind of approach people, especially with this subject area, what I think was so interesting, I came in with this presentation, I suppose, with a certain preconception about how we would discuss suicide, and it's been completely aside of that, which I think has been absolutely amazing.
Oh no, I haven't done what you wanted.
No, which is brilliant. Which is absolutely brilliant.
You've done much better.
Yeah. And even, I suppose, talking about, and I think it's testament to yourself as well, for your own experiences, talking about something in a certain light with, there is such gravitas with this, but obviously, even with an element of positivity in some ways, has kind of made me engage with this subject matter completely differently. So thank you.
Thank you. And I would just like to add to that I think it was amazing the way you just kind of recontextualized and framed everything within communication design for the students, because your tips, I think they were really, really helpful. And they yeah.
Has anyone got anything else they want to ask?
Any questions?
Yeah.
Where are you all from? Can I ask where you're all from? Where are you all from? Which countries are you from? China? Japan? Korea? else? Hungry? Right. This is going to have context for you culturally. This whole subject, so Japan, China, anywhere, it's going to have context for you slightly differently. And I think that some of the Contagion stuff will have different resonance with you, and it'd be good to look at your cultural differences in this subject. I find it fascinating, the cultural differences, and the cultural resilience and the cultural acceptance of this, because some cultures accept this really, really easily. You're in London and there's one death on the tube every day.
Yeah.
You're in a city that's got a problem. And yet there's a certain level of acceptance. And culturally, it would be interesting to explore Japanese culture, Chinese culture, how your cultures react to this, because you react to it differently.
It's nobody
it's
Dutch
interesting.
here in a way, because they're actually serving.
Who's serving?
Dutch, yeah.
Dutch, yeah. Again, more liberal, less liberal, but I just think it's interesting. France, I don't know how France reacts to this, but it's just interesting to give it a cultural slant, because different cultures deal
Some
with
countries have
this.
stronger religious interference.
My father, I'll leave you with this. So the morning after it happened to us, so Mark died about 6 o'clock on one night, and the next morning my father came to my house. And because my father is Greek, I'm Greek Cypriot, and because my father is Greek, Greeks, if anything happens, they feed you. Okay? My father, I opened the front door, my father handed me 2 chickens, I took the chickens and I took them into the kitchen and I put them in the kitchen. My mother was dealing with the chickens. It's our way. He had no words. He couldn't make this better. He couldn't, I was his little, I'd gone back to being his baby, but he couldn't pick me up this time and he couldn't make it better. But what he could do was feed me. And that went on for days, and I needed to go back to work after 10 days because I was going to be like, because they were just kept feeding me. These Greeks kept on turning up and feeding me. But again, it was the loss of control, and it's different cultures and how they show that they love you and that they want to make this better, but actually they can't make this one better.
Yeah, this project has been really interesting for me because I'm French, but I was raised in the Netherlands, and so for me it's almost a natural thing.
Yeah.
And like talking about this project to Dutch friends, they like they really it's so ingrained now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's almost no debates, and whether you're from a political angle or another, it's something that is natural. And I think it's quite interesting also. I mean, the French side, they completely avoid the conversation, which is also quite interesting angle. It's really, really interesting. And I really love the fact that from a communication design point of view, that you talked about contagion and responsibility as a designer. Because we could so easily come up with, we first wanted to take some like fun perspective on it, or I don't know, you try to avoid the blue angle somehow, but there's so much responsibility behind it, so great.
My experience, you just say after it happens, how is that? It reminds me how in Chinese culture, what is happening to me. So the weird thing is, I was, because I'm close, that's my mother who did it. I was close. But the others tend to lie to other relevant
absolutely.
Like made up some other disease.
There's a lot of lying around this.
The truth.
It is the taboo. It's the taboo.
Few of our families know how it is.
I have people all the time that come to my group and they say, I've told the children that their father died of a heart attack. What have you done that for? Because they've just lost one parent who's taken their own life, and now they've just lost trust in another parent. So where are these kids going to be? But because the conversation is really hard, the words are really, really hard. I cried when I had to tell my boys. But you still have to tell them the truth, because otherwise you're making this like 10 times worse. These words would be 10 times bigger, because you're building on something there. And again, semantics, language, really, really important. Honesty, taboo. The taboo around this is still big.
And it's also about, again, attitudes being connected to these emotions. and then
Yeah.
also about cultures. And then, you know, that's what it all goes back to at the end.
Can I just say they were chickens and they still had their feathers and hair? They weren't like chickens that you guys get from Tesco. They were like Greek chickens, like.
From the farm, yeah.
You know, the chicken population is more or less the same as ours.
Really? Two less from that day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.